long overdue to share my level 2 sourdough bread recipe with you. If you're new here, hey, I'm Baker Betty. I'm a baking educator, and a few months ago I did a whole series on sourdough, walking you through the whole process of making a sourdough starter from scratch and baking with it. If you click on the playlist link down here, it'll bring up all of the videos, and if you want to see the level 1 sourdough bread recipe, you can click on this comment and it will take you back to that recipe. That is where I suggest you start if you're brand new to making sourdough bread. But if you're getting confident with it and you want to kind of step it up a notch, here is my next level. This is kind of my everyday sourdough bread. It is the one that I make the most often. The main difference in this recipe and the last recipe is just the amount of water. The hydration is higher in this recipe. We're going to use 350 grams of water in this recipe as compared to the 325 grams in the other recipe. And I like to use just barely warm water. This water is around 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. It really doesn't matter what order you put your ingredients in, but I usually start with water in first, then I go in with my starter. My starter was fed about 6 hours ago. It's really nice and bubbly. It has more than doubled in size. It was about at the 2.5 centimeter mark when I first fed it. So it has risen from there to the 6 centimeter mark. So it is nice and active. I'm gonna do 100 grams of the starter, the same as my last recipe. I like to give that a quick little stir before I add in the rest of my ingredients. Then we're going to add 500 grams of bread flour and 10 grams of salt. All you have is all-purpose flour. It will still work, but you're not going to get as much of a rise. I'm going to add my 10 grams of salt, and then I'm going to start mixing this with my spatula first, and then I'm going to have to get in there with my hands to really make sure everything is nicely combined and hydrated. Once my dough is starting to look like this, where I can't really do a lot more with my spatula, I'm going to go in with a clean hand wide open. I'm going to start grabbing and massaging it. It's almost like I'm giving it a deep tissue massage. I'm really getting in there and pinching it and squeezing it. I want to make sure all of that flour gets really nicely hydrated. I also want to make sure that I'm not feeling any granules of salt anymore. I want to make sure everything is evenly incorporated. I've been doing this for about 1.5 minutes or so, and I can tell everything is really nicely combined in here, so I am going to let this rest. Now, I do want you to notice at this point how there is no stretchiness to your dough. It just completely breaks if you try to stretch it. This is going to dramatically change in just a short amount of time when we come back to work with our dough. So I'm using this bowl scraper to scrape all of this dough back into my bowl, and I'm going to cover this up with a damp towel, or you could use plastic wrap, or a shower cap is actually a really great bowl cover. And we're going to let this sit. And over the next 2 hours, I'm going to come back and do 4 rounds of stretch and folds, leaving about 20 to 30 minutes between each round. But I want to try to get all 4 rounds in the next 2 hours. It's been about 30 minutes since I mixed my dough, so I'm going to do my first round of stretch and folds. What has been happening in the last 30 minutes is the flour has finished hydrating, and the proteins in the flour have started linking up and forming chains of proteins, aka gluten. So now the dough is going to feel much different. It's going to have some stretchiness to it. I like to have a little glass of water beside me. I'm going to dip my finger or my hand in the water just to get it a little bit damp, because my hand won't stick to the dough as much if it's damp. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop underneath the dough, stretch it up as far as it will let me without tearing, and then fold it over itself. I'm going to rotate the bowl and continue doing this all the way around the dough. What I'm doing here is kind of a substitution for kneading a bread dough. This dough is very sticky. I wouldn't be able to knead it without adding a lot of extra flour, and I don't want to add extra flour. I want it to stay really nice and moist and on a higher hydration. So what this is doing is it's actually aligning the gluten strands and stretching them out so that they have more extensibility to them, so that they can expand more to hold in the gases from the dough. After I go all the way around the bowl, the dough is going to look a lot smoother. It's going to look like it's holding some shape, kind of holding together in a nice little ball here. And now I'm just going to let it rest again for another 20 to 30 minutes. And we'll come back and we'll do this again 3 more times. So All right, I'm doing round 4 of our stretch and folds, and then my dough needs to finish bulk fermenting. It needs to bulk ferment for about 6 hours total, so about 4 more hours after I finish my stretch and folds. Bulk fermentation is the first rise your dough goes through, and it starts as soon as the yeast or the sourdough starter is in your bread dough. So it has already been happening for the last 2 hours, and I'm gonna give it about 4 more hours. Now, after my last round of stretch and folds, I typically flip the dough over so that that smoother side is kind of pointing up, because when I go to shape this, I'm going to dump this out of the bowl. The smooth side will go out on the counter. I will shape it inward, and then this will become the outside of the bread. You'll see when I get there. You don't have to do that. I just like to do it. And then the other thing I should note is that while for the best results, I try to do 4 rounds of stretch and folds about every 20 to 30 minutes. If that doesn't work in your schedule, that's okay. If you can only get 3 rounds in, or even 2 rounds in, or even 1 or none, it will still work. But getting all 4 rounds in is going to give you the best rise in your bread. It's about 4 hours later and I'm already in my pajamas, but I'm going to shape my loaf before bed. I'm going to let it rest in the refrigerator and then bake it tomorrow morning. That is my preferred method. I like to bake cold loaves. One, because I think they hold their shape better. They're a lot easier to score, and you're going to get that increase in flavor just from it fermenting in the fridge overnight. You can see my dough has really increased in volume, and it's kind of rounding in the side of the bowl, which is a good sign. We've got nice active fermentation going on. I'm going to dust my counter with flour, just kind of lightly. I don't need a lot down. And then I like to use a bowl scraper to really, really gently release this from the bowl, because I don't really want to completely degas it. So I kind of just go around the edge and get it to flip upside down out of the bowl here. I don't want to put any flour on top of the loaf because this is going to become the inside of the bread, and I want it to naturally stick to itself. And then just for my quick shaping technique, I do what's called a letter fold. I'm going to come to the bottom of the loaf, just kind of let it rest on my fingertips. I'm not squeezing it or grabbing it. I'm just guiding it out and folding it in. I'm going to come over to one side. I'm going to guide it out gently and bring it in and just make sure it's sticking to itself. Go to the other side, guide it out and bring it in. And then we're going to do the top down, just like that. And now I'm going to take my bench knife and I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to get all of the excess flour out of the way. If the top of the dough is really sticky, you can add a little flour to the top, but now we're just going to round this into a nice tight ball. I kind of just let it stick to the counter as I pull it towards me, sort of tucking the sides under until it has a really nice tension on the outside and it's holding its shape. If there are any big surface bubbles, you can pop those, and then you can either use a bowl to let it proof in overnight, or I like to use my Banneton basket. If you have rice flour, that is preferred for dusting the basket because it does not contain the protein in it that will form into gluten. I don't have any rice flour here right now, so I'm actually using whole wheat flour, which is kind of your next best option. I dust it in the basket. I'm going to also dust it over the loaf and gently sprinkle it around. If you're using a bowl, just line it with a lint-free towel and do the same thing, dust it with flour. And if I'm using an oblong basket, I still do not shape it any differently. It will kind of form to the shape of the mold. So I'm going to go in underneath it and I'm going to flip it over so that the seam side is up, and just make sure it's sitting nicely in the basket. And then I'm going to cover this and refrigerate it. I'm actually going to let it sit out for about 30 minutes and then I will refrigerate it. You could either let it sit out for 30 minutes and then bake it, or let it sit out for 30 minutes and then refrigerate it. It's not going to do a lot of rising in the fridge, so I want to make sure it's fully proofed before it goes in the fridge. You can see, because I did such a good job of not degassing it, that it's already really bouncy. It already has a lot of air in it. If I press in on it, I don't have a lot of tension, which is a good sign that it's already pretty proofed. So 30 minutes should be good. Then I'm going to cover it, go in the fridge. Tomorrow I will bake it straight cold from the fridge. I find that this can stay for about 24 hours in the fridge before it starts kind of losing structure and overproofing, but I'll bake it in the afternoon tomorrow. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to make a part 2. I was trying really hard to fit this all in this video, but I talk too much. So tomorrow I will post the baking and show you the final loaf and cut into it. Have a wonderful night. Bye.